As you work through this lecture, ponder on this thought. When you enable webhook for fulfillment on a single intent, every intent that you've configured needs to be fulfilled using this webhook. Is this true or false? We'll see soon enough. We now have our server code up and running on Heroku, the platform as a service option that we chose to host our code. We are now back to the Dialogflow UI to complete the final steps to connect our webhook URL to our bot. Click on the Fulfillment tab in the left navigation pane, and this will show you where you can configure your webhook URL. Click on Enable for the webhook option. You'll have two options in the newer versions of Dialogflow because we have the inline editor for cloud functions as well. We're not using that. Click on Enable for the first option at the top. There's a place where you can specify the webhook URL of your Heroku app. Remember, this is where we left off in the last class. We said the URL to the code that we have running has a / webhook at the end. Now, if you're a little confused as to where this / webhook came from, this is what we had configured in the app route decorator within our Python code. We had basically said that the route to this particular code is / webhook. So we have the base URL, which is at herokuapp.com, and then we have / webhook. Now, this page is where we give Dialogflow all the information that it needs to make post requests to webhook. So if there's any authentication that you set up on your server before the post request can be successful, or if any headers you have to specify when you make the request to your server, all of that can be configured here. We'll do none of that. Our API is open and anyone can access it. We'll only set the option enable webhook for all domains. I believe that the newer versions of this UI doesn't even have this option. It is enabled by default. Click on save, and we've basically configured fulfillment for our bot. Now, individual intents have to be configured so that they use this fulfillment method via webhook. Now, we haven't fulfilled the book rooms, book cars, and the other intents that we've configured during the course of this class. We've only written the code in order to fulfill the check whether intent. So we can't configure the other intents to be fulfilled via webhook. We only go for the check whether intent. So go into the check whether page, and at the very bottom, you'll see a new fulfillment tab that is now available to us. This was no longer present earlier because we hadn't configured fulfillment via webhook. This is now available. Click on that and then click on the checkbox which says use webhook for fulfillment. Notice that there is another checkbox here which says use webhook for slot filling. You can also configure your bot such that the required parameters which have to be extracted from the user in order to fulfill the request, such as the city, the date, and other required parameters that we've seen in this bot, can be fulfilled via webhook. That's a slightly advanced scenario. We're not covering it in this course. You can always check it out once you have the basics of Dialogflow understood and you're familiar and comfortable configuring bots. Once you've written your server code and have it hosted at the right place, this is all that you need to do to enable fulfillment for a single intent. The only intent which will be fulfilled using this external server code is our check whether intent. In order to enable other intents to be fulfilled using our server code, we need to go in and enable this configuration for every intent. But more importantly, we need to change the code that we have running on Heroku in order to handle the different intents. We won't be covering that here, but that's something that you can practice on your own. One thing to note here is that if you're indeed using webhook to fulfill multiple intents, then you need to configure the action string for every intent and check this action string in the server code to determine what action needs to be fulfilled or which intent needs to be fulfilled. If you remember, we'd spoken early on, action is one of the sections within an intent. We need to specify a string there, and that is the string that you'll check within the JSON data that is sent as a post request to your server. We'll configure the action string on the check whether intent and see how to access it in the post data request when we see a prototype example of the cloud functions. We won't see a complete example of cloud functions, but we'll see a simple example, and that should be enough for you to follow along what's going on. Configuration for fulfillment is now complete. We are now ready to check out our weather bot, test it end to end. I'm interested in the weather forecast for New York. As we've configured our intent, it should come back and ask us for the date for which we want the weather forecast. If you remember that we queried the Open Weather Map API only for the next 5 days weather. So make sure you specify a date within the next 5 days. This is our test use case. As long as you know that the integration is working, you should be good. If this were a real app that you wanted to deploy to production, you would, of course, use a more robust API and query dates many months in advance. Wait for a little bit. It has to hit the external URL, make the API request to the Open Weather Map API, and you can see that this has been successful. The forecast for New York on the 6th of October 2017 is broken clouds. Our external integration has been successful. You can try a couple of other examples. Always keep within the 5-day limit, and you'll see that we've managed to get our post request from Dialogflow over to Webhook. This then runs our Python code, which queries the Open Weather Map API. We get the result from Open Weather Map. We've constructed a text response, which has been sent back to Dialogflow and which is now displayed on screen here. This is fulfillment of an intent. And you should know the answer to this question now. The answer is false. Every intent can be individually configured to be fulfilled via webhook. So, except for the check weather intent in our chatbot example, all other intents are not fulfilled via webhook. We can only enable them for fulfillment through webhook if we write the appropriate code to run in our server to actually fulfill those requests. False is the right choice here.